Hello, and welcome to our Lymond Book Club. I'm Laura.
I'm Deanne.
I'm Philippe.
And we are reading part 1, chapters 6 and 7 of The Game of Kings by Dorothy Dunnett. Dee is going to summarize what we're going to talk about.
Yay. So this is the end of part 1. We hit the end of part 1 at the end of chapter 7. Okay, so this is what happened. So the chapter 6 opens with George Douglas, and I just really don't want to get back there. And George Douglas there's a messenger has come to George Douglas, which you relatively quickly realize is Lymond. And he sort of blackmails George Douglas for access to Crouch, but he does it in like this really kind of nice way. Like they're very polite to each other and all this. And it's almost like Douglas is kind of like, so you're blackmailing me, right? And the other guy's like, yeah. It's really funny. So then Douglas is like, oh, I'm sorry. I sold him to this other guy. And then he's like, but, I'm going to have to tell the other guy, which is Andrew Hunter. I'm going to have to tell Andrew Hunter that, well, actually, it was even more subtle than that. He gave him this piece of paper, gave Lymond this piece of paper that says that Andrew bought Crouch. But then on the back of the paper, handwritten, is this, hey, tell me if anybody's looking for Crouch, from Hunter. And so Douglas clearly wants Lymond to know that, by the way, I'm going to warn the guy that you're looking for Crouch. And so he says, I'm going to have to send a group of men to talk to Hunter about Crouch, but hey, if there's an extra guy in the group, nobody's going to notice. And Lymond's like, oh yeah, nobody will notice. So it was this very civil exchange. It was so good. I loved it.
Notably, what George Douglas thinks at the end of that scene, which is that he wants to put a collar and chain with Douglas and Gothic letters on the neck around Lymond. Yeah,
in like Gothic writing or something. What was I put? Oh, the Turkish style. Oh no, not there. There's something else that was the Turkish thing. We'll get to that in a second. No, yeah, it was. My note on that was, he says, whatever it is, by God, I'll find it and make a collar and chain of it with Douglas and fine Gothic letters on the neck. And so what I wrote was, wants to capture Lymond, but personally? And I was like...
He also thinks right before that he feels a strong sense of affinity for this strange man who just showed up at his house blackmailing him.
Right. He's very charming. Very charming. So Douglas wants to capture Lymond. So then we go to Andrew Hunter's house, and Andrew Hunter's mother is like horrible. I mean, Harridan would be an appropriate way to describe her. She just sounds horrible. And there's kind of this description of her at the beginning that like I had a tinge of sympathy, because it was kind of like her husband died, her beloved son died, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, oh, okay, the lady's cranky. So first I wrote down Andrew's mother is cranky. And then I got like 2 more paragraphs into the chapter and I crossed out cranky and wrote mean. So like, that lady's terrible. And then Crouch seems like a super nice guy, but super boring. And I wrote down, seems like Mr. Collins from Pride and Prejudice,
And he seems to like to talk quite a bit as well.
Yeah, he likes to hear his own voice and he likes to talk just like Mr. Collins from Pride and Prejudice. And he seems like but he seems like a lot more personable. Like he clearly cared that Andrew's mother was treating him so bad, and he was kind of trying to he was trying to make her see Andrew in a better light, which I thought was really sweet. So I like Crouch. He's nice. I don't think I want to spend a lot of time with him because he'll be telling super boring stories. But so then Lymond shows up at Andrew's house and beats Andrew to like a bloody pulp, apparently. And they have a fight, and like I thought the fight was interesting because it wasn't just like Lymond got the best of him quickly. Andrew actually almost won. And then there was this little comment I thought was hilarious where Lymond basically disparaged the fine things in the house by saying like, hey, if you had rushes on your floor, this wouldn't be so bad. fancy tile on the floor was making this beat down worse. Like, hey, if only you had brushes, you'd be better off. So, I thought that was pretty funny. So Lymond wins the fight. And then we immediately flip to Lady Coulter visiting and he makes off with Crouch. We don't see that in the scene, but we find out later. So then we immediately flip to chapter 7, where his mother is visiting this goldsmith, and he's painting her portrait, like a miniature portrait of her. And she can hear, the goldsmith runs downstairs because there's customers, and so she overhears the customers, and the customers, it's Andrew, and he is talking to George Douglas about the fact that this guy came and kidnapped Jonathan Crouch. And then he said those two guys, Lymond and Jonathan Crouch, were overheard discussing Gideon Somerville and Samuel Harvey, which is setting up the next section of the book, is what I'm guessing. But we don't actually find out anything about that. So then Sibylla goes back to, is it Boggle House?
The audiobook is Bogle House.
Bogle House. Goes back to Bogle House. I am yet again completely clueless on the locations of this place. Like, anytime a place name is mentioned, I'm just like, whatever. I don't know where they are. I need to get a map and like put little pins in the map and like, okay, where is there? And there is one at the beginning of the book.
Bogle House is in Sterling, correct?
We're right nearby.
We're right nearby. Close enough because they go to Sterling next.
They go to Sterling, yeah. Okay, so then Richard and Lymond are supposed to duel with this like shoot the parrot thing, a Papingo. And so Marietta sees Richard. He has clearly, there's a kind of a big deal made about the fact that he hasn't seen his wife, and she's super bored, and that's kind of implied again. Sibylla, Tom, and Christian. Tom, by the way, seems to be in love with Christian, which is kind of cute. He seems nice. Like, am I picking up on that? Like, he seems like okay. I don't know. I mean, he doesn't seem like he's as witty and smart as she is, but
he's got a good heart.
It doesn't seem like there's mutual interests.
Right. She doesn't seem to be into him at all, but he seems sweet, I guess. Anyway, so they go to the fair to meet a fortune teller. So here, I had a question. So Sibylla kind of leads them both around the fair and like is buying all kinds of shit all around the fair, which seems odd until they meet up with a fortune teller, and then all of a sudden their trip to the fair is over. And so the fortune teller, I'm assuming, is Lymond or the guy who's in Lymond's pay, because there's
Johnny Below, who's not in his pay, but who is the ally and helping connect.
Right, he's kind of an ally. So I feel like the mother was just walking around the fair, like looking for, like she knew Lymond was around, so she was just looking for that and just wasting time and buying a lot of shit and making Tom and Christian carry it.
I do agree with you that I thought it was Lymond at first too, because I'm starting to have Lymond imposter syndrome. And every new character we meet, I think, is it Lymond?
Right.
Yes. No. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was until the scene at the end of the chapter where the Gypsy and Lymond are two different characters, and then I was like, oh, okay, I guess it wasn't Lymond before, but I still think his mother was looking like that was the whole point of going to the fair.
I agree with you.
Yeah, not an unreasonable assumption.
Yeah. So then Marietta and Agnes and Andrew are watching the pop and go shooting and discussing it, and Agnes does this great rant about how you shouldn't, like, you can't sell somebody's future when they're 5 years old. Like, women shouldn't have to like bow to the whims of men, and like it was like a page and a half of this 13-year-old girl just going off.
Like totally calls bullshit on patriarchy, and it's like, yeah, she's so badass.
It was so good. I was like, you go, girl. So anyway, and I love the fact that at the end of that, it was like a page and a half of her doing this, and like at the end of the diatribe, she's like, yeah, I'm not going to marry him no matter what they say. I'm just like, good for you. So.
And I think what you said before when we first met her was totally true also, which is like the reason she's a romantic is because it's an escape from the like really unromantic reality that she lives in, and she's fully aware of it.
Yeah, she is. And I think kind of feel like she's also very aware of her own escape mechanism. I mean, she seems to be pretty aware for a 13-year-old. Like, she's just kind of like, nope, I'm going to be dreamy about this because all of this rest of this stuff is crap, you know? and also, this isn't part of this scene, but I thought it was telling later in the chapter where somebody's talking to Lymond. Richard, maybe? I don't remember who it is. No, it wouldn't be Richard. I forget who it is. Somebody's talking to Lymond about how pretty she is, and says that like her face looks like melted candles or something. Basically.
Oh yeah, that's when he's talking to John Blue at the end.
Yeah, Johnny Blue, and then he basically says, "Oh no, her face is beautiful and witty and whatever because she's super rich." And it was just like this blatant acknowledgement of like the reason she's valuable is her monetary wealth and what she brings. It, like, her person has no value to most of the people in the community, particularly the men, although you get the feeling like Lymond doesn't actually think that. He's making a commentary on that fact. Anyway, so they're watching this Papingo thing, the parrot. They're watching this parrot. So a whole bunch of people shoot, blah, blah, blah. So then Richard steps up to shoot, and there are three, he shoots and misses, and then there are 3 more arrows, and the first arrow shoots and frees the birds. The bird starts to fly away, and then the second arrow shoots and kills the bird as it's flying, and then the third arrow shoots and hits Richard. And there's a point later in this scene later when Richard is injured where they're talking about how the first 2 arrows were like super well shot and like perfectly on the mark, and wow, that was so amazing. And man, that third arrow just missed. Like, how did that happen? Like, that was such a bad shot. Like, clearly he shot his brother in such a way that it didn't hurt him very much, but injured him, you know? So obviously it's setting up that like he really is an enemy of his brother and all of that. Yeah, like, man, it's like he lost all his skill on the third shot. So, okay, so then Boucle, is that how you say his name again? Baclou,
yeah.
Baclou and Sibylla are talking, and Baclou is pretending that he's sick because he doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to go talk to Gray because he's going to have to disown his son if he admits, like, if he gets face to face with the English. He's going to have to either disown his son, or he will have to like say, well, I'm not your ally anymore. And so then they're going to come burn down his house. So if he can just avoid being around them, then he can just kind of live in this, like Schrodinger's cat, you know, is he loyal? Is he not? And like, they won't be able to pin him down because he doesn't want to disown his son. Sibylla convinces him not to track down, like, because he's going to go off with his bloodhounds and like track down Lymond because he shot Richard, and Sibylla convinces him not to do that. And she's like, I'll take care of my son. And then he's kind of like, oh, I wouldn't want to be. I think she convinces him that she's going to be like harsher on him than anyone else, and he's like, okay, you take care of it. He's like, and then he says this thing, he's like, I think my dogs are going to be really sick, and I'm going to be really sick. He goes off. I'm like, I love it. And then they deal with the whole the Johnny Willow.
That's a gypsy.
Yeah. So he comes, and the gypsies are going to perform, but then Tom and Marietta and Christian go to the fortune teller to get their fortunes read.
And Agnes.
And Agnes, yeah. And Lymond and Christian banter because clearly Lymond's the fortune teller. So Lymond and Christian have this lovely banter scene over what truth and what is truth. And then I thought it was neat that Christian tells Lymond all about everything she knows about Crouch, even though he already knows all of it, obviously. So it's not pushing the plot forward anymore because it's stuff that we already know. But so the only purpose of that is really to show that Christian is not holding anything back from Lymond, and she's telling him everything that she knows about what's going on.
I think she's also giving him a heads up that Dandy overheard and told George Douglas.
Oh, right. Although I wondered if they did that if he allowed them to overhear. I guess we just don't know.
Yeah, it always strikes me as like, why did he let Dandy overhear that he's going after those people? But
yeah. So maybe he didn't. Right, but yeah, she tells him that she knows all that stuff, and that's the end.
And there still isn't any sort of proof that Christian knows it's Lymond, although we assume that she
totally knows. Like as soon as she heard his, because they talk about his voice. There's a couple of places where it says like she hears his voice and like starts, or she hears his voice and like turns. So she recognizes his voice, like she knows. Well, no, you're right. So she knows it's definitely the guy
exactly
from the boat. But does she know the guy from the boat is Lymond?
We had talked during that chapter about how it wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I think she knows that it's him,
I think she
specifically Lymond. So
well, that's one of the things I had on my list that we should talk about, because I think it's like slightly ambiguous, but it's almost well, and this is a very Dunnett thing. She doesn't always come out and say things. She just heavily implies them, and then later on you find out that whatever the subtext was actually the text. Because why would they be talking about Richard so much, and why would he say I didn't try to kill anyone today if not only like did she not like know who he was, but also he knows that she knows who he is, because he's saying like I didn't try to kill my brother today. Like why would they talk about that if they didn't both know that she knows who he is?
Yeah, I think she knows. I think it's like this understood thing between them that he is who he is.
What do you think that she feels about Lymond, and what does he feel about her?
I mean, I think there's mutual attraction. I don't know if we can go farther than that. I think they're both smart. They're like a good pairing, you know. So
yeah, I'm just wondering, I mean, she's clearly helping him with his plan. Does she know the plan though? Is she giving him exactly the information he needs, or is she just sort of reaching out with any information she has and saying, this is what I've overheard, you know, people tend to talk in front of me. They probably think, being the blind woman, I'm useless. I don't really know much, so.
I mean, she knows he wants Crouch. So what she tells him is all about Crouch.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something she knows. I don't think she knows what he wants to do with Crouch, but neither do we.
Not yet.
That's not something that we found out. I mean, I feel like, I don't think they're having like a big torrid love affair or anything, but I feel like their wit and their understanding of the world, it's like they're copacetic, you know, they understand each other. And do we know how much contact they had before the story starts? Like, do we know?
We do not know.
Because I think that would be an answer. Like, if we know, like, if they've known each other since they were kids and their families have interacted over time, like, that's a different kind of relationship than if this complete stranger shows up at her castle unconscious.
You know? So there's a couple things in that chapter and in those conversations that I think are telling but aren't conclusive. One of them on page 153 is when Sibylla mentions love potions, and then right after that it mentions that Christian's face is red. And then the other thing is
yeah.
You got it?
Yeah.
Why was her face red? Yeah. The other is the sort of structure of their conversation and the way they talk about parting. Like they have this whole conversation about, you know, she says, we seem to waste all our meetings talking nonsense and all the time I feel, and then he says the great sands are running out, and they have this whole conversation about, he says like this thing about how our time is running out like an hourglass, but all you need to do is flip the glass and time. And then she calls that cheap theology, and he apologizes, and then he tries like these other notes to leave on and gives her like different poetry. And it's like, why are they having this whole conversation about how they don't have enough time together, and why is he trying to give her a proper goodbye with poetry? Like if there's not something, to ship them, just, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's reasonable. Like, she's clearly the only female character other than his mother that we've seen so far that is any sort of a match for him. So unless we're going to have a queer relationship, which would be great, and I'm not saying there's not going to happen, that seems to be slightly implied in several places that can happen too. But if he's going to have a relationship with a woman that's romantic, she's our only option at this point. So,
yeah. Why do you think also like going into that scene, she's super upset. She's like scared. And then when she gets there, he kind of calms her down. But why is she so upset?
before the fortune teller scene?
Yeah, there's all this stuff about how she's
snapping.
Yeah.
Have something to do with Tom?
No, I mean, so is she privy to the fact that, what's his name again? Buclo?
Clue.
Never gonna say that right. Buclo is not gonna hunt him down with the bloodhounds. Like, does she know that Sibylla headed that off at the pass? Like, obviously she knows that everyone thinks he tried to murder his brother. So there's two options. Either she thinks he's a fratricide, is that brother? Yeah, fratricide person. Or she thinks he didn't intend to kill his brother and everyone's going to hunt him down. So both of those would be reasons to be super upset if you cared about someone.
Yeah.
So, which she.
No, I like it because she's really upset and she goes in there and she asks him a lot of questions that are kind of getting to, you know, did you try to kill your brother? Did you shoot your brother? And she's obviously upset because, you know, she knows Richard really well. She was there after he was shot. Like, it's really traumatic when someone you care about gets hurt. And she's, I think, trying to sort of pick through, like, did you actually do this? And then even if you didn't, like, she's upset because something bad happened that affects both of them badly.
Yeah, and people are going to be after him even more, like, fiercely than they were before. And this whole discussion about violence, I thought was interesting between them. You know, like, she's talking about, like, there's multiple kinds of violence. There's like negligent violence and there's purposeful violence and there's, you know, and then they start talking about like religion as violence, and that was good.
I feel like she reveals that she knows who he is and that she isn't sure if he tried to shoot his brother because she asked him twice. She says, among civilized mankind, what excuse is there? And then right after that, she asks, what kind of excuse would you make for a private assassin? So I feel like she's really clearly like, did you try to shoot your brother? What excuse is there for you maybe doing that?
Well, in the top of the next page, she's like, or the top of page 157, he says, do you admire self-control? He asked, and she took her chance. I admire candor. It's just kind of like, tell me the effing truth right now. You know? And then he comes back with this kind of bullshit answer of like, truth's nothing but falsehood with the edges sharpened up. And I was like, what?
I was going to ask you about that one.
Yeah. I love the whole, I might loathe you, but I'd respect your courage. You know, just the, like, that sort of truth wouldn't hurt me, would it? Might affect you, but then you deserve it. And I don't know, like, I feel like she doesn't let him get away with stuff, really. Like,
also, why do you think, because, like, the other thing is they're kind of in this limbo of, like, they know that she knows who he is, but they don't say it. And I feel like he kind of says why when he says, like, once the truth is out, there's no repair, no retraction, no possible going back.
Right.
So, like, by pretending she doesn't know, they can keep this relationship going. Whereas if they admitted it, it's like kind of like waking up from a dream and having to deal with the reality of like, she really should be helping a wanted outlaw.
Well, on one hand, she's got plausible deniability. So I think this whole thing about truth is actually has more of a moral consequence at the time the book is set than it does now. So like Christian could honestly tell someone that this man has never told her his name, you know, like, and she could answer that question honestly, and she could do something like swear on a Bible or something and say like she was never told his name, and she could answer that question. She could say that very honestly in a way that someone would believe her, because she would be damning her soul if she lied about it. But if they get more explicit, then she doesn't have that slight loophole that could save her in, like, if she gets questioned about something. And that was probably a reality, like that the odds, if someone suspects her and begins to question her, like, lying, like that it's possible that she's not a liar the way that Lymond is, you know, and that she really does need some plausible deniability, and so he's giving that to her by not doing this. Yeah.
I wonder if it's also a self-protective mechanism for him, where he can say, you know, she doesn't know that I'm an outlaw, so I'm not like taking advantage of her. I'm not corrupting her.
But like, I kind of feel like, I don't know. I'm not sure he lies to himself that much. Like, I feel like he's pretty self-aware of like what, you know, like I feel like someone who would do something like that, like, would not be able to manipulate people as well as he does. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, like he's got to be pretty self-aware of his own motivations and his own stance on stuff.
How does he use the metaphor of if I told you I killed my sister?
Well, that whole, okay, so let's read it. So, truth, nothing but falsehood, with the edges sharpened up and ill-tempered at that. No repair, no retraction, no possible going back once it's out. If I told you I'd murdered my own sister, you'd register appropriate feelings of hate and revulsion. If you found out later I hadn't, I'd be sure of your interest and sympathy in twice the depth of your hate. Whereas if you'd simply found proof positive that I had killed her, I might loathe you, but I'd respect your courage, she said candidly. But that sort of truth wouldn't hurt me, would it? It might affect you, but then you'd deserve it. I mean, did he have a sister who died?
Yeah, there's a mention at the beginning that he had a sister who died at school when she was young.
Right. So that could be just a sore subject for him, that his sister died and he grieved her. But also, it's kind of a horrible thing. Like, if he's just kind of pulling the most horrible thing he could think of out of his mind, you know, killing your sister is pretty bad. And would potentially not have like a political reason. Like, killing his brother, people certainly have a political reason for that. Killing your father, you could have a political reason for that. But killing your sister doesn't really get you anywhere. So it would kind of be like evil for the sake of evil, maybe.
Yeah.
Mm.
I have a couple historical, I guess, things to share real quick here. First off is the Wapenshaw takes place at Stirling. Can you see my Stirling Castle? So this is a real place that you can actually visit in Scotland still. I've not been, but one day it's going to happen. And then I was going to read from the Dorothy Dunnett Companion Volume 1, the definition of this is Volume 1, but there is a Volume 2 also. But I guess it didn't all fit. Wapenshaw originally was a count of arms and men, so it was weapon show, which then became Wapenshaw. But it basically it was about, like, because they didn't have a standing army, so like the people would come and like should demonstrate their archery, and then they'd hold law courts. But it basically developed into an excuse for a fair, which is what we see in the book. Like, at that point, it's a fair.
Yeah.
Which also totally reminded me of Robin Hood again, like with the whole archery contest. So
there's so much of that.
And also, the whole scene gave me major Renaissance Fair FOMO. Like, I really want to go to a Renaissance Fair right now, although I doubt that they're happening. So
they're not happening. They're canceled.
And I love how she describes it, though. She describes like all the classes and like all the weird stuff that Sibylla buys also, and like it's all, of course, being Dorothy Dunnett, it's all like historically accurate stuff that you could buy there. And
like the ox feet are leaking blood. Like the whole bit about like she apologizes to Tom and she's like, oh, that'll wash out. Honestly, there were so many parts in these two chapters that I just started laughing. Like, I've got little smiley faces written like all over on the margins of things. One thing I do, like right after the killing your sister thing, though, Christian says this wasn't actually funny, but I just thought it was a really good turn of phrase, where she says, To be sure, said Christian serenely, and painting with breath is my stock in trade. You'd forgotten that, hadn't you? And I'm kind of like, that speaks to a little bit of history. She says, I'm an architect in lexicography. I can build you a palace of adverbs and hermitage of personal pronouns. And then there's an ellipsis, and then she pauses. And I can give you information about Crouch. It's just this lovely, like,
by the way,
I can do this, and I can do this, and I can do the thing you want.
I wrote that one down too. It's such a beautiful quote, honestly. An architect.
An architect in lexicography. Yeah.
There was another quote I wrote down, which was about Tom Erskine with the ladies. Reduced single-handed to coping with so much potential gunpowder, he felt himself like the bird which cleans crocodile's teeth, assailed by hideous doubts.
Hideous doubts.
As you would if you were a bird cleaning crocodile teeth. And another quote I loved was when Buccleuch like barges in and is rude, where I think Sevilla is trying to keep Richard away from the Wapenshaw, and people keep showing up and reminding about it.
Yeah.
But he barges in and he's like, you know, he's rude, and Sevilla talks to him about addressing a lady, and he's like, I'm not here to address a lady. And she's like, but since you called and I'm hostess, I'm afraid you can't avoid it.
Yeah. Since you walked in on me, you idiot. Like, sit down. Like, and I love the way that shows, like, so we always talk about like women not having power in, you know, like in these like extremely patriarchal societies, like women didn't have a lot of explicit power, but they did have some implicit power, and like the social power that she wielded was like, she's very specific about wielding her power and like having, because he can't do anything because she's the hostess, and he, as a gentleman, like there are rules that he has to follow, and so she can manipulate those rules to her advantage, you know, in ways that it doesn't compensate for the amount of power that he has, but like women weren't powerless. And
there's also a part where after she talks to Buccleuch, where she's like, says to herself, my dear, I do hope I've done the right thing.
Yeah. I underline that, because like she's worried that, yeah, she doesn't know.
It made me wonder, and it's a good question maybe to discuss, how much do we think at this point is she involved in Lymond's plan? Do you think she's all in, she knows it all? Is she just a part of it? Is she just making accidental discoveries that help Lymond? Or I don't know. This chapter really made me think that she knows a lot more than we've let on up to this point.
How come? I was gonna say why.
Well, just the whole, she knows something is going to happen to Richard, obviously. Now, it has been well known that there's going to be a contest at the Wapenshaw, at the Popinjay event, which happens, and she's trying to make sure that Richard doesn't go. But I also think she knows that Lymond isn't going to kill his own brother. She's probably not happy that he gets hit with the arrow, but it all is part of Lymond's plan, and I think she's aware of that. Doesn't mean she necessarily wants it to happen, but I don't know. She also does a lot of maneuvering with the gypsies, bringing them back to the castle afterwards, and then sending the girls along to sort of, I think she knows that Lymond is with them. She mentions Johnny Bullough by name in that scene about him in the Philosopher's Stone. So she's aware that Johnny Bullough was a part of it, and I think she knows that he's one of Lymond's men. So she's sending the girls along to sort of, you know, have a communication with him. That's my theory, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like she knew that Johnny Bullough was with Lymond.
Mm-hmm.
She knew that Lymond was there. Like, otherwise, why is she worried about Richard? She knew, like, and she was making contact with Johnny Bullough on purpose. And that was the whole, like, wandering through the fair, buying a whole bunch of shit, was to do that specific thing.
Right. And also, she knew that,
like there's a plan.
Yeah. She also at that point knew that Richard was probably going to get hit by an arrow. So she, didn't want to be a part of it. She was trying to dismiss herself from that whole, she didn't want to watch it for certain, but, it kept her distracted as well.
Yeah. So there's a couple, I agree with that. So I wanted to just talk about the funny stuff again. Like, okay, so there's just a lot of it, and I love the way her turns of phrase go, and I'm trying to find all the places
I have a good one.
Okay.
125, when she introduces Crouch, and it's with Mr. Crouch came his tongue, his teeth, his lips, his hard and soft palate, his maxillary muscles, larynx, epiglottis, and lungs, all the apparatus which enabled him, ne plus ultra, to talk. Like the enchanted garden of Janus, tenanted by demons, the keep of Balagan encased the ceaseless drone of Mr. Crouch's voice. He droned through September until it and his captors were exhausted, then pounced on October with undimmed vigor and worried the blameless days for a fortnight. And then there's another part a little bit later down the page where she says, incidents of his boyhood surged to cataclysmic peaks of pointlessness. The whole thing cracks me up so much.
Cataclysmic. Oh, and then when Andrew brings out that brooch for his mother, and it's obviously like super gaudy and super expensive, and then Crouch goes off on how it belonged to the king's mistress. And it's like, it doesn't dawn on him that that's probably not the thing you want to say about this piece of jewelry that his son is giving his mother. He kind of trails off, and she's super mad about it. And okay, wait, where was okay, so this one I was confused by. This wasn't funny, I was just confused by it. So this is after the fight between Andrew and Lymond at the very end of the chapter, where there's that bit about how he kind of is teasing him about how, like, who falls upon rushes falls soft. So, like, you idiot, you don't have a soft floor. But then he says, and of tempting me further, said Black Mask, smiling, I have come to see your little English friend, Sir Andrew, but I'll break you a limb in the Turkish style as often as you like. And I'm like, what's the Turkish style of limb breaking? And are we having is this innuendo? Like, what is this? I don't know. So
I will say that's in there for a reason, and it foreshadows things, but I don't want to spoil it.
Okay.
But it is for a reason. And I actually want to ask you about that scene, like, do you think he's being egregiously, like, awful to Dandy? Because he's like beating his head into the ground, basically. He's, like, pretty nasty.
Well, I think his options are knock him unconscious or kill him. I mean,
tie him up?
Yeah, but, like, he could scream. Like, I mean, I think he kind of, if he wants to get away with Crouch and he wants to be assured of getting away with Crouch, the easiest thing to do is to kill him. Like Andrew Hunter.
Yeah.
Let's not forget, Andrew Hunter almost had the upper hand in the fight.
Yeah, and he almost beat him. So
gone very awry there.
It could be that he's just doesn't trust him to tie him up. It could be some sort of history, and he's super mad at him and is being excessive. I don't know.
I like how he took the time to even tie up Catherine, who doesn't seem like she would cause too much of a problem, except for her acerbic wit, probably.
Happy.
I think the most telling thing in that chapter is the way it ends. I mean, about Dandy, is the way it ends with him passing out, but it's not the man who beat him up that he's looking at or thinking about. It's the black, unwinking eyes in the bed. It's his mother's disappointment that hurts him even worse than the beating he just got.
She's horrible.
She's horrible.
Horrible. There's this other bit. So back to the funny stuff. On page 141, they're going through, this is when they're walking through the fair, and they're talking about, like, they listened to a ballad monger, and they bought a lengthy scroll containing a brand new ballad, which Tom Erskine read briefly and then discreetly lost, which I'm assuming means the ballad was dirty. Like, it had a bunch of, like, stuff in it. He's like, I don't want these nice ladies to see this ribald, vocabulary. No matter, said the dowager cheerfully when told. Dangerous quantity music, because it sprouts sweet venom in their ears and makes their minds all effeminate, you know. We can't have that. He was never very sure whether she was laughing at him, but rather thought not. And it's like, she was definitely laughing at you.
Oh yeah.
100%. So I love the way that Dunnett does things like that, where it's like a character thinks something and it clearly tells the reader the opposite of what the character is thinking, but she does it very subtle. I mean not that wasn't too subtle, but she does it like in brief amounts of language. She doesn't like dwell on things. She just kind of like throws it in there, and then you just, if you're reading too quickly, you'll miss it, but otherwise it's a nice little bit. And then where else? Oh, so Agnes, okay, there's this bit where Agnes and Dandy and Marietta are talking about the patriarchy and all that, and Agnes is going off about how like this isn't romance and I don't want to do this, and so then Marietta suddenly intervened. Don't be silly. What do you want? An altruistic uncle for security and a boudoir full of lovers for pleasure? I mean, sounds nice. And then Agnes just says, I should like a husband who put me before business or politics. They don't exist.
Not this time.
There's something else Agnes says too about like basically like I don't need to have a husband to have like, you know, romance.
Yeah, right. She's like, why give someone all my money? Yeah. It's a good chapter.
There's another bit, where is it? With Sibylla and Tom that I liked. It's like a heraldry joke, and it's like translated in this Ultimate Guide to Dorothy Dunnett's Game of Kings, where she says, there's a cloud over the sun, and if the saffron gets wet, Tom, you'll be ore as well as ghouls, and very likely rampant as well. Mm-hmm. And in heraldry, ore is gold, ghouls is red, and rampant is upright or rearing on hind legs, which is like a picture of that. Mm-hmm. So she's basically saying if it rains, the saffron is going to turn him red and gold and make him like probably go like, ah, get it off.
Well, also, I think the red was embarrassed. Like the saffron's gonna dye whatever you're holding, because it's gonna dye a bright yellow. Like whatever you're holding is gonna get dyed bright yellow by the saffron. If it gets wet, you're gonna be embarrassed.
The fact that she makes a heraldry joke that you'll only get if you know like these obscure heraldry terms, like she's just amazing. She's so nuts.
Time in the SCA is serving me well here.
While I'm in here, I'll also translate the Crawford Motto for you, which is
yes, please.
Which is translated in here. It's contra vitam recti morimer, which translates to either we will die against a virtuous life, or in spite of life's efforts to thwart us, we will die honorably, or we will prevail and remain virtuous. So it even says in the book, this is a highly ambiguous motto.
What was the first one?
We will die against a virtuous life. I think that's the literal Latin translation.
Oh. Okay. We'll die against a virtuous life.
So I think the middle one is the most sensible one. In spite of life's efforts to thwart us, we will die honorably.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and what was the third one?
We will prevail and remain virtuous.
Okay.
Not speaking any Latin, I have no idea which one is the most accurate.
Yeah, sorry. No Latin here either.
No Latin for me. I did not go to that kind of school.
I'll share also just a couple more fun things. One of them is where we meet George Douglas. Here we go, which is Dalkeith. However, the current house is a more recent than the story, built in 1702 after the older one burned down. But I also thought it's cool that it's now in the Buccleuch family.
That's interesting.
And then also just, I could not actually find any fan art of this chapter, but I found this one, and it's obviously some kind of in-joke, but it seems apropos, and it is Lymond fan art by Tristan's Milkhorn on Tumblr.
Uh-huh. Oh, speaking of the way Lymond looks, I'm sort of cracking up at the fact that he's apparently very successfully disguising himself with a hat. Multiple times it mentions that he's just wearing a skull cap that goes from like ear to ear above his brow. So like clearly he's got some sort of like thing that's over. So it's hiding his hair, like, and he's blonde. So it's a distinctive feature, and it's hiding this distinctive feature. Sure, okay, believable. But apparently it's like a super effective disguise, even with people who you'd think would know what he looks like. So,
well, he wore a wig once too when he was
in this chapter. He's not wearing a wig.
Not right now.
Yeah, twice it describes him as just wearing a hat and like a hood, and then he puts his hood back, but he still has the like skull cap kind of thing on.
I feel like it gives him a plausible deniability. Like if he stops in an inn and gets a beer, like they're not going to be like, "Oh my God, it's the outlaw Lymond."
Yeah, yeah. There's this blonde guy.
But like we don't actually know. Like maybe George Douglas does know it's him. Maybe Dandy knows it's him.
Yeah, because that's what he was wearing when he was fighting with Dandy. Yeah, and like, have they never met? Like,
yeah.
I'm super curious about how close all these families were. Like, how much interaction they had before this series of conflicts. You know, like, is this the kind of thing where like you would meet these families like once a year? You know, there'd be some sort of like regional whatever.
I mean, it's a pretty small group of
it's a small
like noble people in this relatively small country at the time.
Yeah, but at the same time, they didn't travel all that much because it was super hard. So
they go back and forth to France all the time from Scotland.
Yeah. Right. So confusing.
Richard has an Irish wife, which is actually people take like note of this, that it's unusual, and there's not really an explanation in the book about why.
Who has an Irish wife?
Richard. Mariotta's Irish.
Oh, was he? They're one of the families that's real people, right? Or no?
The Coulters? No, they're fictional.
Okay,
Richard and Sibylla and Lymond, they're all fictional.
Okay.
But pretty much everybody else is real. Like Christian's not real, but the Booklus are real. George Douglas is real.
Christian's not real?
No.
Okay. So you can't say shit. He has an Irish wife because he would have in real life because he's not real. So.
Exactly. I sort of am curious if like the reason was because there was going to be more backstory, because there's also Irish characters in the next book, and maybe it was like part of this whole backstory about the Irish characters and how they got to know the Coulters, and then maybe it got cut, but like it left the lingering remnant of Richard having an Irish wife.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Or did she bring money into the family? Because that would always be a reason to marry someone random.
They have a bunch of money already. I love that part where George Douglas offers him a ring, and
he's like, I don't care.
Rich man, and he's like, I am a rich man.
I don't need it, thanks.
No. And then George Douglas is like, I won't make that mistake again.
Yeah. So funny. It's just like, it's like, hey, I'm an outlaw, but I'm not gonna steal anything.
Yeah. Oh, and then the other thing is that Lymond leaves him beer, and the chapter starts out with
right.
rumor about what happened at Hume Castle got out, so everybody knows that somebody broke in and stole their beer. So he's revealing who he is.
Yeah, he clearly was telling George that he was the one. I mean, he was clearly telling him he was the one who stole all the stuff from Gray. Yeah. The implication being that he was Lymond. But yeah, it's like that. He wasn't hiding that at all. I don't feel like he was hiding anything from Gray. I mean, from Douglas.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was just like their whole banter was so like friendly / flirty. Like it was
flirty, yes.
I mean, it was really weird.
I guess the last few things I had noted down. What does Lymond mean when he tells Christian at the end, I shall write?
Yeah, I was wondering this too. She's not going to be able to read it. I don't think Braille existed. I know Braille didn't exist yet, so he even says right.
Yeah. Was he teasing her, or was he like, is he gonna do like some sort of code so someone else can read her the letter and they won't know what it is?
Any other favorite quotes, questions, or observations from you guys?
I do have an observation that I'll bring up. It's something that's probably known. It's not really about the content of the book, but it's about something I discovered sort of in the chapters in the prologue. If you look at the cast of characters in the beginning of the book, the three people that Lymond is sort of going after and the three people that the chapters are named out of, Jonathan Crouch, Gideon Somerville, and Samuel Harvey, are all listed as former officers of the royal household. So I think that gives us a clue as to what his plan might be. And I'm also wondering, and I guess foreshadowing, I predict that at some point we're going to have some chapters that take place in England. At least I hope so. And I think that may be where it's leading it. He's trying to get some information from these former servants about the royal household. That's just my guess. I don't know. I'm trying to stay as unspoiled as possible. I also would really like to go back. In a lot of the chapters, they're all about chess. And a lot of the sort of sub-chapters, capture of a king's pawn. Let me find another one quick. More blindfold play, the queen moves too far, mishap to a queening pawn. I'm wondering if all of the characters are sort of rated by what chess piece they are. And I'm sure that there's somebody that did this and it's out on the internet somewhere. I'm not going to look it up. I'm going to come up with my own conclusions for that. But I'm terribly interested in sort of the chess symbology that's happening. I'm not a master of chess by any means, but I at least know what the pieces do.
One of
the power rankings.
One of my favorite chapter headings is the one for blindfold play, which is where we get to know Christian and where she finds the amnesiac prisoner. And it's like, it's not fitting or covenantable thing for a woman to go to battle for the fragility and feebleness of her. And it's just so, like, I feel like it's hilarious because it's so ironic because Christian is so badass and competent, and it's just, you know, LOL.
And the queen is the most powerful piece in the chessboard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like, if she's the queen, or if there's an implication that of the pieces, like, she would be a powerful piece. I think, yeah, it's interesting, Philippe, you're right about because not only are the three guys former officers of the royal house, first of all, former is interesting, but they're the only officers of the royal house. Like, there are no other officers of the royal household in that list because the other two people in the list are the wife of Gideon and the daughter of Gideon. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of interesting. That something to,
point out. I think we'll find more about Gideon Somerville. We still don't know, even though we know that Lymond's rescued Jonathan Crouch.
No idea what he did.
Not yet, at least. So
he rescued him or he kidnapped him, but
he rescued him from being a prisoner, and perhaps he is now Lymond's prisoner.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I feel like he kind of kidnapped him because he was doing fine. Like, not only was he doing fine, he was part of this system that was going to probably relatively quickly get him home. Like, this whole prisoner exchange thing is a well-oiled machine. And so he was, like, sitting in the room of the lady of the castle, clearly a trusted person, like, and he had been telling stories and nobody, like, stuck him in the dungeon for being so boring, so clearly he was being treated really well. And I'm also super curious about the fact that Andrew wanted to trade him for a cousin, but there's literally somebody says at some point when the chapters are like, I didn't know he had a cousin in England, like, so there's this whole, I'm super suspicious about what Andrew was doing with Crouch, because I just feel like from the way a couple people mentioned that the whole trade him for a cousin thing was a big fat lie, and that something else was going on. So.
Speaking of big fat lies, Dandy tells everyone that he got beat up in a fall from his horse, and then he tells George Douglas what really happened.
I also found it interesting that Lymond went to George Douglas first. Like, there's a part of this that he didn't know. He didn't know that Jonathan Crouch wasn't there at that point. And, like, up until this point, it seems like Lymond knows everything. And then here was a part that he was like, oh, he's not in this house, huh? Unless he did know that, and it's just part of the plan.
Yeah, because I feel like the difference between his approach to George Douglas and his approach to Andrew Hunter are, like, so different. Like, if he assumed that Crouch was at Douglas's, wouldn't he have approached Douglas the same way he approached Hunter, which was like, whack him over the head and, like, tie up the lady and whack him over the head and but he didn't. He kind of sauntered in and was like, hey, where's the guy?
I have two comments on that, actually. One is that, Philippe, you and Will Scott are on the same page about Lymond. He knows everything. The other thing is, actually, Lymond has been playing catch-up with Crouch the whole time. At the very first chapter, when he breaks in, the first time when he meets Lennox and Wharton, when he goes into Annan and he puts the helmet on Henry Wharton's head, he shows up just wanting to get Crouch, and basically gets corralled to then go meet the leaders, and he's like trying to not go meet them. He's trying to get away. So actually he didn't know that Crouch had already been taken. And so like, and then again, same thing, he goes to George Douglas and it's like, nope, still behind the times. So even though he seems like he knows everything, no.
He's just like 2 weeks behind Crouch at every place. Which, I mean, verisimilitude, because news can't travel very fast, so except apparently gossip, because that travels super fast.
Everybody knows about the Spaniard at Hume.
Yeah, everybody knows about the Spaniard.
Is there any other stuff you guys like, either you noticed in these chapters or you're sort of hoping will happen next?
That's everything I had. I'm super glad we got the Wappenshaw chapter. I was looking forward to that last time. It was also really nice because a lot of the characters that we've only spent like a little bit of time with sort of all came together in this chapter. So I like that moment of, all these different characters we've discovered meeting.
Yeah.
Well, not the first time, but it's the first time that we've seen it happen.
I like seeing more of his mother and seeing a little bit more glimpse of like, maybe she's into it more. I was super sad that he shot the parrot. Like, he released the parrot and then he shot the parrot. Like, you could have just let it fly away. I mean, it probably would have died, but it's in Scotland.
I feel like it would be much more meaningful if he had let it go free.
Like, come on. There's no need to shoot the parrot.
I agree.
No, but showing, and I do not agree with him shooting the parrot at all, but showing that he can both set it free and then hit it while it's moving and has an even larger.
Yeah, I mean, it was a power move, obviously, but
that shows that he's definitely a skilled archer, which everybody should assume then after that he absolutely was trying to hit Richard, not that it was a mistake.
Yeah, he was definitely trying to hit him in the shoulder or wherever it was.
Because nobody else even got close.
Yeah.
No. So.
But I like seeing more of his mother. I just want to get to know the characters more. That's really all I want. Like, I mean, but that's just the way I read books. Like, I'd rather have characters sitting around in a room talking to each other than, I don't need plot. Like, I mean, plot for me is just the frame that you hang the characters on. So I just want to know more about who these people are and how they interact with each other. What's going to happen to Agnes? Like, is she going to grow into this, like, confident 16, 18-year-old, whatever, down the line? Are Christian and Lymond going to get together? Are they not? Like, is Lymond going to betray someone unforgivably? Is he going to, like, save the day but nobody's going to know and they're going to think he's a bad guy the whole time? Like, what's going to happen? But I'm more concerned, but when I say what's going to happen, what I'm really concerned about is, like, what does that mean for the characters? So does Lymond, like, does he find redemption? Does he, like, is he sort of nobly gives up his reputation for others? Like, does his mother find out that he's got good intentions? Does she not? Does his brother, like, what goes on with his brother? Does he ever spend any time with his wife? Like,
Richard?
Does Richard ever, like, realize that his wife is just waiting around for him? Like, dude, get a clue. Mr. Practical needs to.
I'm gonna quote you in the YouTube summary. Dee's take on Richard. Dude, get a clue.
Get a clue. Hang out with your wife a little bit. Like, yeah.
No, it's really interesting noticing the difference in how you two talk about it, because the first two chapters you're like, I don't understand any of these characters. Oh my god, there's so many characters. And now that we've like gotten to know them and we actually spend some time with them, now it's like, okay, now we're actually engaged with the characters.
Yeah. I'm getting to know them a lot better.
Yeah.
I'm not confused as much. I'm still a little bit confused, but mostly because I don't know a lot of the terminology, but that's okay.
10 times and I still get confused. It's not an easy book.
Characters more. Like, like Tom seemed to be a kind of decent guy in this character. So like, what's his story? I'm kind of intrigued with Henry Douglas, like what's going on with him, you know, where does he come from and who is he? And I really don't want to know any more about Andrew's mother because she seems horrible. And
Catherine.
yeah, let's not spend any more time with her. But I kind of feel bad for Andrew. Like he was clearly clearly this poor man just wants his mother's approval and he'll never get it. Like it's obvious, like he's never going to get it. And he's clearly in competition with a ghost. Like his brother is perfection and he will never live up to. And his mother like blatantly said something about, I guess brothers can't be alike or something like that. And just like,
and the way she says it is so condescending, and it's like, oh, if only I was a better mother and I could teach you to, you know, do things right, but you know, you're just so hopeless.
I failed, and yeah, it's just so terrible.
I feel like it's really astute psychological insight the way she like creates this relationship between them, because it's so human and it's so real, and you can kind of sympathize with her, like you were describing in the beginning about how she lost her son and her life has been hard too. Yeah, and so it's like this, they're both human and yet they're hurting each other so much, and neither of them is some kind of evil sadistic monster, and yet it's a terrible.
It's an interesting contrast between her and Christian, because both she and Christian have a physical disability that would make their life very difficult in the 1600s in Scotland, or the 1500s. I don't know, where are we?
1500s.
We're in the 1500s. Okay. So like that would be super hard. Like even for women who are wealthy and have resources, like to be bedbound or chairbound would be super hard, and to be blind would be super hard. And Christian has come out of this as an intelligent, vibrant, compassionate, caring, like person that you want to get to know and be around and all of that. And Catherine is like this horrible, manipulative tyrant of her son, and it's just terrible. And so it's neat the way that Dorothy Dunnett has given us like these two women that are almost like, even though we don't see Catherine very much, but they're kind of like mirrors of hardship in this sense, and it just makes Christian look so much better. Like it's a contrast that just makes her look even more delightful.
I love Christian so much. I feel like, you know, these books have so much reread value because things are, one, as you uncover what's really going on, like the meaning changes because you know more about what's happening. But also there's such richness in like the allusions and the quotations. So I was scrambling to get ready for this because I did some work this morning, and I was going through the companion with all the like quotes and like reading the poetry that like Christian and Lymond are quoting like snippets to each other, and like everything has layers in it that like relate to like kind of subtext of what they're saying to each other. And it's just like, one, it's beautiful and it's such a tapestry that she's woven. Two, it gets me exposure to like 14th century French poetry that like, when would I ever have read that? And then three, it gives us these like, you know, more insight into the characters and more depth in the characters as you like look up those things and figure out like, oh, is he actually implying something because like he quoted the first part of this, but then the end of it says something, you know, meaningful.
It's also super interesting as a revelation of how educated Christian is, which is not, I would imagine, not normal. Like, she's not only educated in a classical sense, which women were not always educated in a classical sense, but she's also educated in a classical sense as a blind person. So somebody obviously took time to read to her all of this in such a way that she memorized it, which is super impressive. It makes me really curious about her father and like what her father, like what his goals for her were and how he arranged like her life and who was around her so that she had the ability to grow up in this way. Like, Yeah, because he had to have intervened. Like, there's no way that she would become the adult that she is with the knowledge that she has without her father making some pretty specific decisions about her education.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of cool.
I want to go read some Christian Stewart fanfic now.
I'm sure it's out there.
Surely.
Do you guys have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Nope. Looking forward to the next chapter.
Yeah.
So.
I want to find out what's going on with Crouch. I super want to see how Lymond deals with Crouch. Like, knowing what we know about Crouch and how he talks, the way he talks, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be funny. So I don't know what's gonna happen, but I feel like humor is coming up.
There's definitely more coming. All right, well, we're gonna talk more next week.
All right, sounds good.
Bye.
Bye, guys. See you next time.